Roland Garros 2025 was stacked. The Big Four reunited, and we saw a legend's footprint etched into the sands of time. The French guys showed up, and it was showmanship in its purest form. But then what came next was ridiculous. We witnessed one of the greatest tennis matches of all time between Sinner and Alcaraz. The arrival of a new queen in Paris, coupled with lots of strange comments, endless drama, and controversies.
She won the match not because she played incredible, just because I made all of those mistakes.
And I'm saying Sinner and Alcaraz against Rafael Nadal on clay. You would make a serious argument with both guys that they would be favored to beat Nadal.
Here we go with a full breakdown of all the action, my tactical analysis of the most important matches, and the key moments that made Roland Garros 2025 unforgettable. The first objective of the week was to right the wrongs from Rafael Nadal's retirement ceremony at the Davis Cup last year. Most of us came to the conclusion that the farewell given to him just didn't cut it. This time though, he was given the proper treatment totally befitting of his legendary status. On a court where no mortal could touch him, Nadal was given the stage. From the walkout to the standing ovation to the speeches, the inclusion of the most important people in his career, plus his three biggest rivals, the Merci Rafa shirts, down to his footprint. I thought the organizers totally aced it by taking into consideration all of the little details, the heartfelt gestures, and giving Rafa the closure that maybe he couldn't get last year when he was still in a competitive frame. One thing's for certain, no one will ever forget the kid from Mallorca. Thank you, Rafa.
I remember arriving in Roland Garros, a place that I was able to watch on TV during all my life. I remember even on crutches going at the highest part of the stadium and saying, hopefully next year I will be here to do good things.
From one GOAT to another, Novak turned 38 the week before the tournament, and it was yet another historic week that saw him finally get to title number 100 in Geneva. He's only the third man in history to do that after Jimmy Connors with 109 titles and Roger Federer, who had 103 over his career. With 4 consecutive wins under his belt, a confident and hungry Djokovic showed up in the opening rounds with some serious firepower behind the serve. Novak had a total of 6 love games against Mackenzie McDonald. The Joker found a lot of success serving out wide, pushing McDonald off the court and finishing him off with clinical +1s. An 81% first serve win percentage and 71% on the second serve from Novak made life extremely difficult for the American, who wasn't exactly playing badly himself either. Drop shots were a frequent go-to strategy for both players, who hit a combined 32 between both of them. The 3-time French Open champ was also hitting big and consistently from the baseline, wrapping things up under the closed roof at Court Philippe Chatrier in just under 2 hours. A straight sets W and a perfect 20-0 record in first-round matches at Roland Garros for Novak. In the second round though, Djokovic needed to dig a little deeper against home favorite Corentin Moutet. Moutet's variety and trickery makes many opponents uncomfortable, and Novak needed to be mentally locked in to avoid trouble. Despite being bullied from the baseline all match, Moutet was willing to give Djokovic a run for his money. He ramped up the aggression in the second set, also getting the crowd involved in just what we've come to see is his signature way. However, Novak's deadly precision from the baseline was all too overpowering. Things did get tricky in the third set though. The Serbian ultimately needed to save a set point before absolutely destroying Moutet in the tiebreak. A perfect 12-0 record against French players at the clay court major for Novak. One thing that stood out to me was seeing Novak go to the net a total of 69 times. Yet another sign of his aggressive intent. The third round against his former training partner, Filip Misolic, was a little more straightforward. Djokovic was in control throughout an encounter that lasted just over 2 hours. Novak was redirecting the 23-year-old's pace and stepped into the court to up the aggression on the big points. Although he kept down the unforced error count to 14 across a straight sets win, Djokovic was wasteful on break points, going 4 for 16 against a player who was playing in the third round at a major for the first time in his career. A 99th Roland Garros match win for the GOAT, who didn't drop a set all week. By next year, it's totally possible that we see Novak with 100 or more wins across all 4 Grand Slams. Djokovic then put on a masterclass against Norrie in the 4th round, dominating both the short and long points. He won 21 of 28 rallies that lasted 9 or more shots, and Norrie never once appeared to bother Djokovic for most of the match. Given the gauntlet of a draw lying in front of him and the possibility of facing the top 3 players in the quarterfinal, semis, and final, it was important for Djokovic not to expend too much energy in his first 4 matches, and I thought he did an insane job at that. But you know what else is ridiculous? Seeing a seasoned top 30 player just happy to win 3 games over the course of a best-of-5 match. It was a total blowout when Jannik Sinner faced Jiri Lehečka in the 3rd round, and this is all Lehečka could say.
I was very happy that I won at least 1 game, you know, but because the way how Jannik played, I think that these 3 games were a big success for me today. So
Sinner played lights-out tennis to brush off Lehečka in 94 minutes, and the crazy part is that Jannik only lost 9 points on serve against Jiri. Watching Sinner this past week, it felt like there was just no getting past him. If you try to play heavier and higher, he'll just take the ball on the rise and hit right at you. Whatever you do, you're getting cooked. Well, except if you're Carlos Alcaraz. Before getting past Lehečka, Sinner had quite the opening match against home favorite Arthur Rinderknecht. Rinderknecht was coming up with some of his most ridiculous highlight reel shots, but Sinner's ruthless efficiency was enough to hush the French crowd. 2 sets down and looking pretty gassed, Rinderknecht threatened to make the match more interesting by racing to a 3-love lead in the 3rd set. And with the help of the crowd, it looked like we had a match on our hands. But Sinner was having none of it. Soon enough, the scores were level at 5-all in the 3rd. The pressure of the occasion must have gotten to Rinderknecht as he missed a routine put-away shot, and Sinner wasted no time in closing out the match. Jannik then sent Richard Gasquet into retirement in the 2nd round, and it looked all too poetic. I mean, imagine a player who spent most of his 23-year career competing against some of the very best to ever step on a tennis court, now finishing off his career against the current world #1. Not willing to go out without a bang, Gasquet treated us to his vintage one-handed backhand, and it was glorious. Retiring in front of his home crowd must have also felt really special. You'll surely be missed, sir. Sinner breezed past 17th seed Andrei Rublev in the 4th round. Rublev showed up with his usual aggressive style, but Sinner went toe-to-toe with the Russian from the baseline before drawing the short ball and delivering a series of punishing winners off each wing. Sinner was also eating up Rublev's 2nd serve, adopting a more aggressive approach on the return. Simply put, it was tactical precision from Sinner. Sinner wrapped up the 1st set in 30 minutes and took care of business in straights. Unfortunately for Rublev, he's now 0-10 against top 5 opponents at majors, and the possibility of him getting past the quarterfinals of a major now looks more distant than ever. But for Sinner, it was a quarterfinal date with none other than Alexander Bublik. Bublik was having the tournament of his life. He had pulled off a Houdini against Alex de Minaur, coming from 2 sets down to beat him in the 2nd round, before pulling off yet another upset by taking down Draper in the 4th round. Bublik absolutely destroyed Draper on the short points, using the serve +1 to perfection. The forehand was doing a lot of damage and had a significant percentage of Bublik's 68 winners all match. But perhaps the most evident tactic was seeing Bublik use the drop shots to disturb Draper's rhythm. Bublik hit a total of 37 drop shots, 12 of which were outright winners, and most of the others finished with an easy volley or ground stroke. It was brutal to watch. Sasha got the job done in 4 sets, and Draper seemed shell-shocked even after the match.
He was using that drop shot. You know, I don't know how many drop shots he hit, but I don't think he missed hardly any either, and they were all incredibly good. It's tough because when you know that's coming, but yeah, he can unload on a forehand as well. You just don't know what to do.
Missed opportunity for Jack to make the quarterfinals, but all credit to Bublik for such a performance. Sasha ran into Sinner in the quarterfinal, and he almost got his man. But seriously, there wasn't much Bublik could do, especially in the 1st and 3rd set against Jannik. Look at how long it took all of these guys to just win a single game against Sinner in the last 1 month. Overall, Bublik will be proud of his performance, and it's a happy return to the top 50 for him. With Jannik and Novak not dropping a single set in the first week, it looked like Alcaraz was going to follow suit, but that didn't quite happen. Alcaraz's title defense started with a first-round clash against Italian qualifier Giulio Zipperi, and I was more concerned about Alcaraz's fitness. He withdrew from Madrid because of an adductor injury and was forced to wear a knee brace during his title run in Rome. Alcaraz, however, quickly brushed off any concerns as we saw him move freely, needing less than 2 hours to brush off Zipperi. Carlos said he expected a worse level from himself, despite winning 27 of his 29 matches on clay since May of last year. He then faced a tricky opponent in Fabian Marozsan in the second round, but it's a match Carlitos had been looking forward to, so he was well prepared for Marozsan's trickery. Alcaraz was tracking down every ball and not losing focus in between points. Now, that said, Alcaraz's level dipped in the second, and Marozsan was able to level things at 1 set apiece. And being a tough opponent himself, Marozsan continued to test Alcaraz's discipline, but the defending champ was up to the task. When he decided to put daylight between himself and Marozsan, we saw a lot more measured aggression from Carlos, who took care of business in 4 sets. But there was no respite. The third round came with a different test, as Alcaraz faced the only Bosnian in the top 100, Damir Đumur. After Alcaraz seized the first 2 sets with relative ease, Đumur transformed into a different person at the opposite side of the net. He grabbed the third set and was up a break in the fourth, until Alcaraz decided enough was enough. Despite dropping a couple of sets in the early rounds, Alcaraz's tactical genius on clay and how the surface elevates his strengths in movement and point construction especially, were always going to make him the man to beat on clay. Alcaraz then set his eyes on 2 Americans in the next 2 rounds. The 4th round against Shelton was a trip to the moon and back. Their combined energies made the match very entertaining, and Alcaraz had to save 3 set points to steal the first set from Shelton, and you get the feeling that the complexion of the game could have changed if Shelton got that first set. For the most part, Alcaraz was redirecting Shelton's heavy power while also hitting insane winners like this. Shelton stole the 3rd set at the death, but seemed to run out of energy a bit in the 4th, as Alcaraz sealed the deal in 3 hours and 19 minutes. A 100th tour level win on clay for Carlitos under the Parisian sun, and a 3-0 head-to-head against Shelton. Now, the best way I can describe Alcaraz's performance against Tommy Paul in the quarterfinal was pure dominance. I thought it was Alcaraz's best performance up until that point. Everything that came off his racket turned to gold. Pure brilliance overall. Tommy could only manage 5 games in a match that lasted just 94 minutes. But before we get into the semifinal and final analysis, what happened to the 90s kids at Roland Garros? When Tsitsipas got through Tomas Martin Echeverry in the first round, I thought the signs looked pretty good. He was hitting the ball super clean, and his first strike tennis was paying dividends. As a result, nothing prepared me for the massive upset against Italian qualifier Matteo Gigante in the second round. The strategy was clear. Gigante was mixing up rally balls and using the drop shots to put Tsitsipas off balance. Drop shot after drop shot. A total of 25 drop shots from Gigante all match, and most of them were silky smooth. Gigante was also closing in on the net. On the other hand, Tsitsipas's forehand deserted him, and he was making way too many unforced errors. 49 of them, in fact, all match. Still, after sharing the spoils in the first 2 sets, Tsitsipas seemed to have no permanent answers for Gigante's brilliant defense and ball recovery, as we could see from one of my favorite points of the match. And just like that, the 2021 Roland Garros finalist crashed out of the tournament. A huge win for Gigante, a first top 20 win, and a first-time presence in round 3 of a slam. I'll definitely be keeping my eyes on him. For Tsitsipas, well, he's gonna fall out of the top 20 for the first time since 2018. And it's also disturbing to think that Steph hasn't made it past the second round in the last 4 majors now. It's hard not to believe there's a mental component to this. Anywho, he's gonna be working with Goran Ivanisevic from next week on, and I can't say I'm not excited for this partnership. Let's see if Goran can help Tsitsipas retool certain parts of his game and maybe find a bit more confidence. Seeing Medvedev crash out in the opening round was one of the biggest upsets. It's not like we were expecting him to make the semis, but I thought Medvedev was going to find a way like he usually does. On the other side of the net, having had a good run at events in recent weeks, Norrie came in with confidence despite losing to Medvedev in straights in Rome a few weeks ago. We then saw the two players with maybe perhaps some of the most interesting technique on tour face off in a best-of-5 format. 2 sets down against Norrie, it looked like the wheels were falling off for Medvedev, but he then unlocked new levels and won the next 2 sets. The 4th set in particular was brutal, with Medvedev losing only 8 points in the entire set. Fast forward to the decider, and Medvedev was serving for the match at 5-4, but he got broken at 15. Apart from making some routine ground stroke errors in that game, he hit a really ugly drop shot that went wide when he could have made a better decision. Norrie then broke and held serve to take the lead, and serving to stay in the set and match, Medvedev was actually up 30-love, but somehow found a way to lose that game. As Chris Eubanks pointed out, Medvedev changed his string setup mid-match, yet another indicator of the identity crisis and panic Daniil might be having. What's next for Medvedev at this point in his career? You tell me in the comments, because it's possible that we see him skip clay at some point in the future. Meanwhile for Norrie, it's a first top 20 win since the 2024 Australian Open. And then there's Taylor Fritz, who lost to Daniel Altmaier in the first round as well. Altmaier's a decent player, a top 50 guy with a good backhand, and average serve, and a forehand that's probably holding him back. Against Fritz, Altmaier's forehand was surprisingly doing a lot of damage, and that's not something I thought I was ever gonna see. The backhand was also doing lots of offensive damage, reminiscent of Stan the Man's backhand back in the day. On his part, Fritz was barely making half of his first serves and couldn't leverage his strengths even on a bad day. Altmaier winning more points on the 0-4 shot rallies was definitely not on my bingo card. But if history tells us anything, it's that Altmaier is fast becoming a giant slayer. He has a 5-7 record against top 10 players and is always going to be a tricky draw. Still, a disappointing result for Fritz nonetheless. He hasn't taken that next leap since reaching the US Open final last year, but what about Casper? Ruud came to Roland Garros with only one goal in mind.
I've had 3 good years here in a row, so try to make it a 4th good year in a row. That would be great.
However, it quickly turned out to be his earliest exit from Roland Garros in 7 years after getting beaten by Nuno Borges in the round of 64, who then became the first Portuguese man to reach round 3 at the tournament. Right after the first set, you could tell that Ruud was struggling with something physically, despite Nuno playing really well and earning his first top 10 win. After the loss, Casper talked about the nagging injury he's been dealing with.
For the last couple of weeks, I've been kind of struggling a little bit with knee pain on and off. That's why I decided to pull out of Geneva after Rome.
That being said, it's time to address the elephant in the room, the long season in tennis. Casper gave us a more inside scoop on why the men and women sometimes carry on playing despite being injured.
You feel you're obligated to play with certain rules that the ATP have set up with the mandatory events, and you feel like you lose a lot if you don't show up and play, both economically and point-wise, ranking-wise, and opportunity-wise, especially when there's a time with mandatory events to skip them because the punishments are quite hard.
And it gets so bad that these guys are literally being forced to show up. Echoing Casper's sentiments, Alex de Minaur also called for the ATP to shorten the tennis season, saying that careers were going to get shorter and shorter because of the burnout. And if you ask Nishioka and many other guys on tour, they'll tell you the exact same thing. Tim Henman also sees things from the same angle, and he argues that there's too much irrelevant tennis these days.
The reality is that the way those tours are structured, they're 50% players, 50% tournaments. And so right now you've got a situation where 50% of your business are extremely unhappy. And, you know, in an ideal world, I think the players would say, we'd like to go back to 8-day Masters 1000. There has to be that structure for the players, but also the narrative for the fans. When you look at the calendar, in my opinion, there's too much irrelevant tennis.
Can anybody really disagree with what these guys are saying at this point? I mean, the season is so long and physically demanding, and at the end of the day, these players, despite being incredible athletes, are also just humans who are struggling to keep up with the demands of training, travel, and competition week in, week out. I've seen what the Premier Tour has proposed in the past, where cutting back on some of the 250s and 500s and putting more weight into the thousands could make the schedule a bit more manageable for players, but that side also has its drawbacks as well. Anyways, what do I know? What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, back to the action. Holger Rune showed up with some impressive performances in the opening round. He showed a lot of discipline and consistency in the 4-setter against RBA and Nava in the opening rounds before surviving a tough 5-setter against Quentin Alice in the third. Holger was a lot less disciplined with his return position and defense against Alice, and he came close to losing the match a number of times. Unfortunately for Holger, Musetti brought an end to his Roland Garros campaign. Musetti has been doing Musetti things, and at this point, he might as well assume the title of a walking highlight reel because he always seems to produce the most insane shots in every darn match. Touching on Andrei Rublev a bit, I didn't have any expectations from him coming into Roland Garros. He just hit his 350th tour level win and has looked to rediscovered some kind of form. Fresh off his champagne war against Flavio Caboli, Rublev's real test was supposed to be Arthur Fils, but Fils had to pull out of the tournament due to an injury, a stress fracture in his back. The Frenchman says he'll be out now 4 to 6 weeks, and Wimbledon is now also uncertain for him. Jaume Munar might want to take back his words because it appears that he didn't believe Arthur Fils suffered a real injury in his comeback win. According to Munar, quote, "If you have a real injury, you don't play the 5th set like he did. I saw him drinking pickle juice in the last set. He was attended by the doctor due to an alleged back injury, but I'm convinced that what he suffered were cramps," end quote. For me, it's always best to give a player the benefit of the doubt when they look to be injured. We can't ever presume to know what a player is going through physically. Still on the French guys, we saw Gael Monfils putting on a show in a comeback win against Hugo Dellien. It was the first time since 2015 that he would come back from 2 sets to love. But unfortunately for Lamonth, he ran into Jack. Speaking of Draper, he got rid of Joao Fonseca yet again, and while it's still early days, it's starting to feel like Fonseca will struggle a lot against these top guys. Fonseca got past Hubi in the opening round, which was amazing because Hubi had made good runs in Rome and Geneva. However, he still struggled a bit with a knee issue that affected his movement against Fonseca, but nevertheless, still a great showing from Joao. Fonseca then survived a very tough test in Pierre-Hugues Herbert in the second round. Herbert, who plays a bit of old-school tennis, was rushing the net and venturing forward every point, but Fonseca was able to hold firm and survive the match in straights. But against Draper, the dynamics were almost similar to what went down at Indian Wells. Draper's firepower was too much for Fonseca, but before we can even get there, let's talk about how Draper forced Fonseca to hit shots like this off balance. Apart from keeping Fonseca off balance all match, Draper was able to absorb Fonseca's pace and redirect those bombs from the Brazilian like we can see here. Draper pretty much controlled everything using his physicality and experience, and once he began to wear Fonseca out, then came the drop shots. Let me say that Draper's consistency from the back of the court, his defense, and his movement make him a very tough opponent to beat. Fonseca would need to add more layers to his game because bashing the ball continuously just isn't going to beat Jack. You can't really blow him off the court. His loss to Bublik is gonna sting for a while. Now, this begs a question that some of you aren't going to like. Is Fonseca overrated? Well, in my opinion, the answer is no. He just has a lot of learning to do, and being a better mover should definitely be at the top of the list for him. He also says he's looking to get his ranking high enough to play at all the 500 events and be seeded in Australia next year. But what do you do when fitness is maybe a problem? Despite being up 2 sets to 1, Grigor Dimitrov retired from his first round match against Ethan Quinn. Dimitrov has now completed the retirement slam by retiring at the last 4 Grand Slams. Hopefully, we get to see him healthy for a few more years. After conducting a symphony of boos, courtesy of the French crowd in his opening match, Jakub Mensik was hoping to plow his way to the quarterfinals, but unfortunately, he got beaten by world number 200 Enrique Rocha in the second round, in what was an incredible comeback win from the Portuguese qualifier. The pattern doesn't look good for Mensik, with all too many 5-set losses at slams. Out of the 5-set losses so far, the Czech was up 2 sets to love in 3 of those matches, but there's no need to panic just yet, because the kid is still growing and developing. Now, Francisco Cerundolo getting beaten by Diallo in straight sets was quite the shocker. Considering how well Cerundolo matches with Zverev and how well he usually turns up on clay, almost no one saw him getting beaten by Diallo. Cerundolo seems to perform better as an underdog, or maybe I'm just overthinking. Anyhow, Fran said that he had a problem in Hamburg, and my best explanation for what happened was that he wasn't 100% physically. I'm not saying that would have automatically changed the result, but the scoreline would have maybe been a bit more competitive. Last week at Roland Garros came with lots of 5-set comebacks, but one of the most eye-catching for me was seeing Arnaldi come from 2 sets down to beat FAA. How many times has this happened to FAA again? He didn't have the best prep coming to Roland Garros, but he said that the goal is the same.
For me, the goal remains the same. Did I have the best preparation? Probably not, especially with the illness in Hamburg. I know that, so that's what I'm saying. It is crucial for me to play well in the early stages.
However, he couldn't get past Novak in the quarterfinal. Djokovic adopted a varied approach in a bid to disrupt Zverev's metronomic baseline play. Djokovic hit 35 drop shots, 24 lobs, 27 volleys, and all of that threw Sasha way off his game. Sasha had some opportunities to be aggressive and take control of important rallies in this match, but the longer the match wore on, he became more and more passive. At some point, it seemed like Sasha just stood behind the baseline waiting for Novak to make the error, but Novak was having none of it. A 4-set win for the best in the history of the sport. When asked about the match, here's what Zverev had to say.
What do you want me to say? He's won 24 of these things. At some point felt like I didn't know how to win a point from the baseline against him. I thought he was having solutions to a lot of things that I was doing. I think at the moment he's a bit underrated, to be honest. Like a lot of people count him out already, but this year he's had wins over Alcaraz at the Australian Open. He has had a win over me at the French Open. So he's still beating the best of the best. So I think everybody needs to respect that.
Sasha now has a 4-13 record against top 10 players in Grand Slams, and you get the feeling that it's going to be more of the same story if nothing changes in his approach to matches on the biggest stages. But how can he manage more tactical flexibility given his limitations in net play, volleys, and other areas? The stage for the semis was set. Alcaraz versus Musetti and Jannik versus Novak. Musetti's quarterfinal against Tiafoe wasn't without controversy, as some fans expected him to have been defaulted for this. Let's be clear here. He didn't accidentally kick the ball. He intentionally did. However, it accidentally hit the line judge. Obviously, it was an unlucky coincidence, and Musetti surely didn't mean to harm anyone. Still, that didn't stop fans from calling it double standards. But here's the million-dollar question. Should a player be defaulted if no harm was caused? Let me know what you think in the comments. By the way, I just dropped a deep dive on Musetti's game and how he manages to beat most top players these days. Check it out if you haven't seen it already. By beating Tiafoe in the quarterfinal, Musetti became only the 5th man in the last 35 years to reach the semifinals or better at every clay court Masters 1000 and Roland Garros in the same season after these guys. But the semis against Alcaraz ended in a rather disappointing manner. Musetti retired early in the 4th after dropping the 3rd set 6-love. Musetti started the game so well and had the chance to go up 2-0 against Carlitos, and the way he did that was by going against the grain. Musetti tried to hurt Carlos by playing with more offensive intent behind the first ball instead of waiting to maneuver his way out of rallies with ridiculous passing shots or something like that. This time, it was different. Musetti was going for broke early on in points, taking large cuts at the ball, going bigger on the forehand and on the drive backhand. It seemed to have taken Alcaraz by surprise. After seizing the first set, Musetti tried to double the advantage but got outplayed by Alcaraz in the 2nd set tiebreak. Now, it would have been interesting to see how the remaining sets would have played out if Musetti didn't hurt his leg. The big takeaway, though, here is that after the match, the Italian said that he felt closer than ever to Alcaraz's level. Meanwhile, the other semi-final clash between Novak and Sinner was of the utmost importance. Djokovic had become only the 5th man aged 38 or older to reach a Grand Slam semi-final in history, and the oldest man to reach the Roland Garros semi-finals since 1968. A 51st major semi for the Joker, but we always knew it was going to be an uphill battle against Sinner. Sinner hits harder, runs faster, and honestly seems to be an improved version of Djokovic. After breaking Nole early on in the first, Sinner took the set 6-4. Djokovic, not exactly going away quietly, then did everything in his power to nudge Jannik out of his comfort zone. He finally got his first break points against Sinner in nearly 7 full sets of tennis late in the second, but Sinner regrouped to take the set 7-5. Now at this point, you'd think anyone would be down and out against Jannik, but the old man wasn't giving up just yet. He took the game to Sinner and had the chance to steal the third set with 3 break points on the return, but Sinner then went into total clutch mode. The set extended into a tiebreak, and after Novak missed this overhead, we knew it was all over. In the end, a straight sets win for Jannik and his 4th straight win over Novak, who very well could have played his last match at Roland Garros.
This could have been the last match ever I played here, so that's why it was even a bit more emotional in the end. But if this was the farewell match of the Roland Garros for me in my career, it was a wonderful one in terms of the atmosphere and what I got from the crowd.
At this point, you can't help but wonder if Nole will go down the Federer path and skip the grueling clay season in a bid to prolong his career. Sinner and Alcaraz have clearly separated themselves from the rest of the pack, and Sunday's final reminded us once again that tennis can hit new highs even after the big three. For the first time since 1984, both the men's and women's Roland Garros singles finals would feature both the world number 1 and world number 2. A whole lot was on the line for both players going into the final, and we knew one of them was going to get their first defeat in a Slam final. The final itself was everything you could wish for in a tennis match. High-quality shot making, physicality, crazy momentum shifts, stamina, grit, recoveries, brave moments, tenacity, sportsmanship at its best, no court antics, no extended toilet breaks, no negativity. It was pure tennis ecstasy, and neither player really deserved to lose that final. The first set was closely contested. Alcaraz did something no other player can do against Sinner early on, making Jannik cover a lot of ground by hitting his backhand down the line hard and flat, and then following that up with a drop shot on the other side of the court. He was making Sinner cover the longest distance possible on the court, and even if Sinner did get to the ball, Alcaraz simply finished the point with an easy volley. Alcaraz continued to pummel backhands down the line. Sinner, on the other hand, was hugging the baseline and ripping 100-mile-per-hour forehands like nobody's business and wasn't giving Alcaraz any time on the ball. Both men fought off break points in their opening service games. Alcaraz was mixing in deep and aggressive return positions, but couldn't use his variety as usual against Sinner like he did in Rome. Ultimately, it came down to a backhand from Alcaraz hitting the tape and going wide for Sinner to steal the first set at the death. Sinner then got the break early in the second set and continued to neutralize Alcaraz's forehand cross-court by taking the ball very early, and you could tell that Carlos just looked a bit rushed. Jannik was also making more first-serve returns in play and was cruising to a 2-sets-to-love lead. However, I should note that Alcaraz did break Sinner when the Italian was serving for the set, and he did force a tiebreak. Once again, Sinner's nuclear forehand proved to be a major differentiator, as he absolutely destroyed the ball off a heavy Alcaraz forehand cross-court to grab the second set. At this point, it was beginning to feel like it was going to be a straight sets W for Sinner, but Alcaraz showed the stuff he was made of. Once again, Sinner got the early break in the third, but Alcaraz was now opening up the court better, using its entire width. Alcaraz was broken while serving for the set, but look at his response and how he just uses more width on this particular point. Absolute madness. Alcaraz broke Sinner to love to seize the third set, and finally, we had a match on our hands. But the fourth set came with even more drama. Sinner was a lot more aggressive on the ad-court kick serve that Alcaraz troubled him with in Rome. A number of times on ad-court breakpoints, we saw Sinner's backhand cross-court draw out an error from Alcaraz. Carlos got broken midway and was serving to stay in the set, but found him 3 match points down. For some reason though, I knew you could never count Carlos out. And if you don't believe me, here's your proof. How did Carlos save 3 match points on serve? Let's break it down together. At love 40, an extended rally follows, but Alcaraz once again finds the most outrageous width possible to push Sinner off the court, and Sinner pushes the ball just long. 15-40. On the second match point, Sinner overhits a second serve from Alcaraz, and this is one he'll probably remember because he was understandably going for it, 30-40. Sinner then dumps a forehand into the net after yet another deep forehand from Alcaraz. You could see the spin and depth Alcaraz created to earn that point. Deuce. Alcaraz then hits an ace, followed by an insane forehand winner down the line to hold serve. With the momentum swinging, Sinner's level definitely dropped a bit after that game. He got broken thanks to another forehand inside in that once again used the entire width of the court. And the set then went into a tiebreak. Alcaraz's serve was clutch this time. Wide ad-side kick serve ace, and then a sliding ace on deuce on crucial points, and he would end up taking the set. The fifth set came, and after Alcaraz broke Sinner, it looked like Sinner was going to just fold. After all, the momentum and the crowd were with Alcaraz. But Sinner was hanging in despite showing some serious signs of fatigue. With Alcaraz serving for the title, Sinner had enough left in the tank for this incredible get. Jannik broke Carlos and was looking to break again at 6-5, but Alcaraz withstood the storm. Alcaraz's hold at 5-6 in the fifth set could go down in history as one of the greatest holds ever in a championship match. Simply put, it was epic. With only a super tiebreak left to separate both beasts, Alcaraz entered God mode with a series of ridiculous plays. He won the first 7 points, and at that point, the comeback and title defense were all but confirmed. And it's crazy because Sinner didn't give Alcaraz any free points in the tiebreak either. Overall, this match will go down in history as one of the greatest matches of all time. Easily top 5 for me. And guys, before you get on me for my tennis history, I'm thinking of matches like Borg and McEnroe, Wimbledon 1980, Nadal-Federer, Wimbledon 2008, Djokovic-Nadal, Australian Open 2012, and Alcaraz-Sinner, Roland Garros 2025 is right up there in my opinion. On a night when the drop shots, slices, height on the ball, and variety were neutralized, Alcaraz still found a way to pull off an escape act. Sinner, on the other hand, handled the moment with a lot of class. He says it's going to hurt.
Obviously, this one hurts.
And it's probably a match he'll always remember. 5 hours and 29 minutes of pure magic and the longest final in Roland Garros history. Could either of these guys beat Prime Rafa at Roland Garros like J-Max says? Look, that's a bold take, but I'm not sure anybody's touching Prime Rafa on Philippe Chatrier. That dude ruled the surface for almost 2 decades. Alcaraz is now 12-1 in 5-setters and 5-0 in big finals. Plus, the contrast between Djokovic's lockdown mode of not missing and Alcaraz's style of playing out of his skin in the biggest moments is clear. Sinner is now 0-5 in matches over 4 hours, but that doesn't really mean anything. If anything, Sinner more than answered questions about his fitness on Sunday. But let's also talk about the fact that Sinner only double faulted twice throughout the entire tournament. That's gotta be a record of some sort. Overall, I'm super happy to be witnessing matches like this. It's the ultimate marketing campaign for the product on court that we already have. On the WTA Tour, a lot of the headlines have been about the scheduling of women's matches. Seeing only men's matches fixed at night isn't something everyone is super cool with. And here's what Emily Mauresmo had to say about it.
In my opinion, it's the length or the possible length of the match that is making it hard for us in terms of scheduling.
Ons Jabeur commented on the issue when it was brought up to her.
And, I don't know if you heard what the president of the French Tennis Federation said Monday, I think it was. He said, we have to do what's best for the fans.
This was her response.
In Europe in general, it's unfortunate for women's sports in general, not for tennis, but for in general. It's a bit ironic, you know. They don't show women's sport, they don't show women's tennis, and then they ask a question, yeah, but mostly they watch men. Of course they watch men more because you show men more, so a shame from the federation.
Several women have also addressed the situation, and some with conflicting opinions. Look, I might get some hate for what I'm about to say, but I've got to say it anyway. It is downright shameful that the FFT hasn't scheduled a single women's match at night over the course of the entire French Open. I've been praising the entertainment value of women's tennis for a long time now, and I've just got to say that there have been matches like Swiatek and Rybakina or Osaka and Badosa that are way more interesting to watch than watching Sinner blow someone out in straights. Now, the FFT's rebuttal to this is that the men's tickets are more valuable since the matches are longer, but since when did we as tennis fans always say that a longer tennis match is a more entertaining one? Anyways, I'll bite my tongue for now, but check out what my friend Eliza had to say too.
0 women have played a night match at this year's French Open. 0. And it is not a coincidence. It's a choice. There have been 44 night session matches since they were introduced in 2021. And so far, only 4 of these night sessions have featured women's matches. This year, none.
Back to playing pain-free tennis for the first time in 2 months, Badosa took down Naomi Osaka, and here's a super quick summary of how it played out. Osaka takes the first set, gets whooped 6-1 in the second, then gets the early break in the third, but makes a bad decision to go down the line with her backhand on the +1 to ultimately get broken. Having now conceded the advantage, the game is dead even at 3-all until Naomi makes yet another crucial mistake. Following a deadly serve +1 combo that put Badosa behind the 8-ball, Naomi has enough time to pick her spot, but panics at the last minute and hits this backhand long. That proves to be the turning point of the match as Badosa breaks Naomi. With the scales now tipped in Paula's favor, she holds her own to close out the match in 3 sets. Truly a tough one for Naomi. She might have gotten better, but so is the rest of the field. The depth on the women's tour at the moment is just truly insane. Osaka's last 4 losses have now all been either 6-4 or 7-6 in the third set. I don't know if that's going to affect her confidence because Naomi was gutted after the match and even broke down in tears. What's next for her? Caroline Garcia is pulling the curtain on an illustrious career, and she deserves a lot of respect for her accomplishments. The American women have been flying high in the opening rounds too. Coco Gauff didn't drop a single set in her first 3 matches. I mean, look at her clay season so far. The finals in Madrid, the finals in Rome. She's been playing out of her skin, and even the double faults are now in single digits. Did I not say this was going to be the key to her success? Meanwhile, Maddie Keys made it 10-0 at slams this year, albeit she needed to save 3 match points against Sofia Kenin in the 3rd round. She got to the quarterfinal where she fell to Coco in 3 sets. Fresh off her title run in Strasbourg, Rybakina seemed to have found her match toughness once again. After getting past the early rounds, Rybakina said she knew what to do to beat Ostapenko in the 3rd, and boy did she show up big time against Penko. Once Rybakina activated the easy power mode, Penko stood no chance. It's the kind of Rybakina performance that was long overdue. She didn't allow Penko to get in any kind of rhythm, and it was a masterclass to say the least. Oh, and Rybakina had totally just done Iga a favor by taking down her biggest nemesis. And speaking of Swiatek, she would eventually take down Rybakina under the most dramatic circumstances. Rybakina won 8 of the first 9 games and was up a set and a break, but then this happened. Rybakina missed a routine overhead and let Iga back into the match, and from there it turned into a dogfight, with Swiatek eventually coming out on top in 3 sets. Swiatek had come into the tournament seeking redemption after a disastrous run of results saw her fall outside the top 4 for the first time in years. But after avoiding her nemesis and taking down Rybakina, Swiatek was beginning to look like her usual self. She overcame Alina Svitolina in the quarterfinal before seeing her 26-match winning streak at Roland Garros come to an end at the hands of who else? Aryna Sabalenka. Iga came into the match with a 5-1 record against Aryna on clay. The match was played under the roof on a wet day in Paris, and it ultimately came down to who was returning serve better. Sabalenka led by a double break at 3-love and served for the set at 6-5, but Swiatek battled back both times. Aryna's serve proved to be key in the tiebreak as she wrapped up the first set after an hour and 15 minutes of grueling tennis. In the second set, Swiatek improved her first serve return before breaking at 2-1. She then held the advantage all the way to the end, and I particularly saw Iga flattening her forehands a lot more. She then got totally outclassed in the third set though by a Sabalenka who made no unforced error. I never thought I was going to see the Queen of Clay getting bageled. But despite the loss to Aryna Sabalenka, there are still a lot of positives for Iga Swiatek to take away from this Roland Garros, and now she has time to rebuild as she has no title to defend for the next year. Shout out to Mira Andreeva also. She showed a lot of grit throughout the first week, and going back to that deep dive I made about her a while ago, it all makes sense. Andreeva is a rare talent, and I can't wait to see what prime Andreeva looks like. Surprisingly, she lost to Lois Boisson in the quarterfinal, and I thought she allowed the French crowd to get into her head a bit. But guys, what a tournament for Boisson. She became the lowest-ranked woman to reach a Grand Slam semi in 40 years, and the first French woman to reach the Roland Garros semifinal since Marianne Bartoli in 2011. She started this event ranked 361, but left as the world number 65. I saw a stat that said her total career earnings before Roland Garros was $148,500. To put that in perspective, she earned $788,200 at this tournament alone. I hadn't seen much of Boisson until now, but looking at what she brings to the table, she might be on her way to becoming the face of French women's tennis. All that said, Gauff never allowed Boisson to settle into the match in the semis. The crowd simply just had nothing to feed on. Boisson hit only 8 winners to 33 unforced errors in a match that lasted just 69 minutes. After the match, she said she felt like she was running all over the court because Coco was just too good. Just like on the men's side, the women's final was a battle between the number 1 and number 2, and this is what was on the line for both players. It was a cold and windy day. Sabalenka pounced on Coco right away, getting a double break to a race to a 4-1 lead, but Coco pulled back a break after some impatient play from Sabalenka saw her hit an unnecessary backhand down the line. The roller coaster set continued. Sabalenka served for the set at 5-4 and 6-5, but somehow got broken by Gauff, who simply refused to go away. Gauff then blew a 4-1 lead in the tiebreak, and Sabalenka ultimately took the first set. Coco then made the adjustments on her side. First off, she began to let her forehand fly. No fear, no holding back, just more aggression off that wing. Gauff got the early break and never really looked back as she took the second set 6-2. Both players exchanged breaks again in the third set, but the pattern had since become clear. Gauff leaned on her defense and forced Sabalenka to play the extra ball on the return. The stats have Sabalenka winning only 48% of her first serves, a far cry from her average first serve win percentage of 69%. Meanwhile, Coco made every ball, ran everything down, hit with consistency, and in my opinion, simply walked Sabalenka right up to the championship point. Sabalenka hit 70 unforced errors to Coco's 30, but to be fair, 32 of those 70 unforced errors came in the first set, which Sabalenka actually won. Maybe we shouldn't take these stats at face value. Also, Coco was putting a lot of pressure on Sabalenka to make mistakes. Gauff successfully drew Sabalenka into backhand-to-backhand exchanges, and Sabalenka wasn't patient enough to reverse the patterns. This is why it wasn't exactly surprising to see that Gauff totally outgunned Sabalenka in the longer rallies as well. Plus, I thought Sabalenka's decision-making was actually poor at times. Meanwhile, Coco adjusted to the conditions much better. She mixed up the patterns, and her speed and insane court coverage meant that she didn't give Arena any easy balls. Sabalenka made some rather strange comments immediately after the loss and didn't really give enough credit for the win.
Conditions were terrible and she simply was better in these conditions than me, and I think it was the worst final I ever played. Honestly, sometimes it felt like she was hitting the ball from the frame. Somehow magically the ball lands in the court and you kind of like on the back foot and yeah, it's just, you know, like it felt like a joke.
However, she's since backpedaled a bit and probably realized her mistakes. Looking at the big picture of this rivalry, Coco now leads their head-to-head 6-5 and has beaten Sabalenka both times in Slam finals. That doesn't sound like coincidence or luck to me. For Coco, she's notched 6 top 10 wins this year, 30 career top 10 wins. She's the youngest woman to reach the final of Madrid, Rome, and Roland Garros in the same season since 2009. She's now won 2 majors at 21, in a love story with Paris, and a destiny fulfilled. Gauff has had quite the turnaround since late last year when she appeared to be at a crossroads in her career. As far as ranking updates go, it's new career highs for these guys in the ATP Top 100. Sinner maintains his lead at the top with almost 2,000 points, Fritz drops 3 spots down, while Tommy Paul re-enters the top 10. On the women's side, it's new career highs for these players. The most significant change in the top 10 is seeing Iga Swiatek at number 7. There are no days off. The grass season is underway, and there are many huge storylines to follow. Novak is still a major contender at Wimbledon, and I wouldn't put it past him for that final 25th major. He's literally still the 3rd best player in the world, and realistically speaking, he only has problems with Jannik Sinner. Jack Draper would be looking to make a statement on center court. Kyrgios will miss Wimbledon after having a setback in his recovery. On the women's side, I'm looking for Aryna Sabalenka to avenge her defeat to Coco, and also I'm keeping an eye out on Elena Rybakina, who looks like she's rediscovered some of her form. It's been an absolute joy to cover everything happening at Roland Garros right here on the channel. So if you're not already subscribed, what are you doing? Smash that button and we'll see you in another video. By the way, I just dropped a video on how natural gut strings are made, and I actually got to go to France myself and see the Babolat factory in person. Check that one out, as well as our upcoming video on the synthetic string factory in Corba as well. Guys, I'm also super excited to share that we'll be going to the UK for Eastbourne and Wimbledon, bringing you content with some of the players that we maybe talk about here on the channel. Anyways, stay tuned, and until next time, keep going for the lines.